Hi, good afternoon, everyone, to Thrive Talks. We'll just give it a minute till people who are in the waiting room are able to join us. Hi, Debu, how are you doing?
Hi, Shreyasi. Great. Thank you for having me over.
No, thank you. I'm so looking forward to this conversation. I think we all need a dose of strength and logical positivity, if not toxic positivity.
True.
So I'm just going to, we're getting people coming in from the waiting room. So I'll just give it 2 minutes. I think we'll reach 50 soon and then we'll get started and others can keep joining.
Okay.
At 4:02, we'll just begin.
Cool.
It's only when we go live is when people who are waiting are slowly able to come into the broadcast.
You've been doing this for a while, and that's quite amazing. The way you have built it up over a period of time.
Yeah, I mean, Thrive Talks is more recent, but at Harappa, I think, yeah, we've been able to have a lot of these conversations in all kinds of formats, from podcasts to these, to live, to recorded. And I think it's always really nice. It really helps us and our thinking and pushes our thinking on a curriculum. So that's great. Great, let's get started. It's 4:02. So good afternoon / good evening to everyone who's joined. Thank you for joining us on Thrive Talks. My name is Shreyasi Singh, and I'm one of the founders of Harappa Education and the company CEO. If you know Harappa and have been supporting us, thank you so much. Your support and encouragement means the world to us. And if you don't know, we are very simply a learner-centered online institution where we focus on what we call Thrive skills and therefore Thrive Talks, which are essentially a set of cognitive, social, and behavioral skills that we believe are very, very critical, both for an individual's professional success, personal growth, as well as for the efficiency and productivity of the teams and the companies that they work with. And we deliver these Thrive skills in both self-paced online courses or high-touch online first learning programs. Today, Thrive Talks, we hold them fortnightly with a talent leader or a talent custodian, who's also interested in these conversations. It's a great way for us to learn and continuously engage with people who are also obsessing about and thinking about the needs of modern talent and India's talent. And so very delighted to have Debabrat Mishra join us today. And it's been wonderful for me to reconnect with Debu after several years when in my previous life as a magazine editor, Debu used to write a column for us. But of course, I think for many of you, Debu is not someone I have to introduce in too much detail. He's been a seasoned consulting leader and has worked across the entire spectrum of people and talent focused teams in firms such as Deloitte, Korn Ferry, Hay Group, where I first met him, Hewitt Associates, Arthur Anderson, and PwC. He's up to a lot of exciting things in all kinds of HR tech and talent tech startups, and of course continues to feed his intellectual and academic urges by teaching and taking programs. So thank you so much, Debu, for joining us, and we're really looking forward to this.
Thank you, Shreyasi. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm pretty excited with the topic and the subject that we are going to be talking about today.
Great. So let's dive right in. So I think for everyone, we chose the subject, which is decoding your strengths DNA, because when things get tough, you focus on the strength. Because this is really, I was thinking about the fact that the one thing, especially for all of us and all of you who are joining us from India, what we've lived through in the last 6 to 8 weeks makes every small thing seem so unnecessary, so irrelevant. And what actually keeps you going is you being able to find the strength. And also as teams, as professionals, who are navigating a difficult personal situation, what you need to do is cut out the drama and the noise and really focus on the few key things that you do well. And I think we speak so much, whether it's in feedback conversations or whether it's in innovation workshops, so much about what we need to add and what we need to fix rather than what we need to amplify. I just felt like a conversation on strengths was a really important one for all of us to have as individuals, as teams, as families, as society, so that we can find some strength in our strengths. So Debu, let me begin by asking you and taking you to this. Why do you say, do you agree with me and do you agree with us that, it's important for us to focus on strengths at this terrifying, confusing time?
So see, first of all, let's start with why is it terrifying? Okay. And if you really dive deep, it's terrifying because it breaks a pattern that we have become accustomed to. So if you were to just flip back 100 years and if somebody from 100 years ago or 200 years ago was to look at the world today, for them, this was a way of life. Before sanitation came in, the life expectancy was around about 25, 30 years, average life expectancy. So we have made huge strides in, the quality of life and humanity all around. And this current crisis is breaking the pattern. Okay. And the second aspect is that humans are designed to amplify negative news. They look out for negative news. And that's a part of our biological evolution, because the human race survived because we watched out for danger signals. So the human brain, and the reason why our eyes are located where they are, is designed to look for negativity. And that's what, the world around us taps into, whether it is advertising, news, media, so that it gets more attention. And we are also seeking it as individuals. So we notice a lot of that. Now, why is positivity important? Is we are here today, you and I, and everybody who's there on this webinar, we are here not because of all the shortcomings we have. Our journey in life is because of the strengths we have. So what we have is the reason why we exist. But we are constantly told and conditioned by society, by leaders, by people who want to take advantage, whether it's politicians or anybody around you, advertisers and media people, that, oh, you know what, you're missing this. This is the thing that you need to focus on. So that negativity is the only hook which has been used, largely because humans are designed that way. But the reason why we exist is not because of all the shortcomings and what we don't have. So that, I would say, is that one important realization that all of us need to start, coming to the conclusion that, hey, I wouldn't have made it this far if I had all these shortcomings. So I need to go back and figure out what is it that keeps me going. What is my, success DNA? The reason why I exist. So that's an interesting question to answer.
Sure. And so you're saying that this is a sort of a neurobiological, default instinct that we have, and obviously gets aggravated in situations like this, and then is also exploited or leveraged by opinion makers or influencers or opinion shapers, as they are, whether that's advertising, media. I think it's a really interesting point through this entire conversation, especially the first 10-15 minutes of the conversation, when we're trying to talk about the need to have this conversation, and then we will follow that up with the two others. How do we discover our strengths both as individuals and teams, and then obviously how do we deploy this? For the first part of the conversation, what body of science do you draw from, and what body of science are you having these conversations from? Is it neuroscience? Is it cognitive learning? Is it psychology? And which branch of psychology?
So I got introduced to the positive psychology branch of psychology. It was probably around about 13, 14 years ago. And specifically the field of appreciative inquiry. So, and that has a very strong, application area for organizations and teams. And it was a very interesting realization that, I used to work in an organization where we would perform very well. So the business performance would be outstanding, but if you measured employee engagement, it would be abysmal. Okay, so we started thinking that, how come people are not motivated, but the business is performing? It goes against traditional management thinking. And so we said that if we go to the problem solving approach, then we'll go looking for problems. And we said, let's try and flip it. And we zeroed in on appreciative inquiry as a field, which basically says that, the reason why we thrive as a society or individuals or as a global connected world is because of the strengths we have. And, decoding that or identifying the root cause of success is the starting point of transformation or rejuvenation. We did that exercise and we found immense value in that. And as a consultant, that was the antithesis of, so I call consultants as the most dangerous humans that you can ever come in contact with, because see, they have solutions. So they always go around looking for problems. So when you call a consultant in, you have invited them to look at all the problems you have. And appreciative inquiry was it was diametrically opposite frame to look at all the strengths that you have and therefore help you amplify that strength. But that journey has been further reinforced with the advances in neuroscience that has been made in the last 10 odd years. And I've started looking at that. So connecting psychology, which was an interpretive layer, and neuroscience, which is far more physiological study of the human brain. And also the other field which gets connected is exponential technologies, which are creating abundance, largely in the areas of water, food, energy, healthcare, education, and freedom of speech, etc. So when you combine all of these fields, you start to realize that as humanity, we have done brilliantly ever since the human race came into existence. We are on track to also be outstanding. So human longevity is predicted to, leave aside the COVID blip on the timeline of humanity. But human longevity is expected to reach 120 years of average lifespans. So because we are making breakthroughs in medicine, healthcare, and the basics that are required for human life. What we haven't done well is learn from the strengths that humans have. See, we exist on this planet, okay, but we haven't learned how to make the best out of it. So if you look at humans, the inherent strength we have, we are the only animal which is designed to survive, or we have developed our ability to survive. Other animals don't even have the capacity to adapt to changes which threaten your survival. But we don't appreciate that. We are constantly almost wearing a cape of invincibility, thinking that nothing will happen to us, and COVID is a great correction. But if you go back to the strengths that we have as humans, we are very adaptive to our environment. We always adapt. So the new breakthroughs in neuroscience says that the human brain is plastic and it continues to evolve and adapt till you die. So it's not that it only grows or adapts in the initial years. So when you combine these three fields of positive psychology, neuroscience, and exponential technology-led abundance, which is coming our way, it actually gives you a far greater positive view of what the future holds and comforts you that we are on the right track, as long as we don't go ahead and spoil what we already have, which we are damaging, which is the environment, how we lead our lives, and so on and so forth. Like I'll take one very specific example around COVID. See, as humans, we were designed to maintain safe distance, not go into dangerous areas, not consume stuff which was not designed for the human body, and so on and so forth. We do exactly the opposite of that. And when that comes back and bites us, we get scared. But in the first place, we shouldn't have been doing that. Living in highly dense population areas was not how we were designed to live on this planet. But we have done that. We have built cities, high rises, and we live in those. We don't expose ourselves to natural ventilation. We take risks. And that has the other, the toxic positivity is one of the explanations that you could have for the phase 2. That when people let their guard down, thinking that, COVID had been, I would say, controlled, is when it came back and hit us even harder. So sometimes the false sense of security or comfort is extremely dangerous. But we have the toolkit, the template, and we are designed to be survivors on this planet. It's just that we are not doing a good job of it.
So very interesting. You said two or three very interesting things. And first, I think that appreciative inquiry exercise, for example, if there's a fun, a set of template or format that you could share with us, because we could send it to the participants. I think that's really useful. So I think this whole strengths-based conversation is coming from then three fields of appreciative inquiry within positive psychology, from obviously neurosciences. And then I love this concept of obviously how you've tied it into this exponential technologies that lead to abundance. And the interesting thing that you're also making a difference on is, this you're actually designed to succeed, but when a sort of a hubris or whatever sets in is when you fall, but then you feel like the situation is faulting, but actually you've gone away from your natural instinct. So there's a little bit of that as well. But I do want to ask, because you mentioned the word toxic positivity, how is positive psychology or this conversation of strength truly different from toxic positivity? Because right now for most of us, theory of constraints is at work, right? I can't move out, I can't do this, I can't whatever, right? And all of us are operating from a place of fear, anxiety, stress, or even survivor's guilt at some point, right? But doesn't the situation right now demand that? I mean, won't a public health person say that's exactly the right thing to do? You should have been much more paranoid about the virus than less. And that is the sense of place you should operate from. And if you actually adapt yourself to operate from that place of so much fear, so much carefulness, so much calibration, then won't you adapt it in other parts of life? And isn't that isn't it then good not to be paranoid rather than focus on strengths?
So see, paranoia and toxic positivity are on two opposite sides of the same spectrum. Okay, so toxic positivity is that lack of evidence, positivity without a connect to evidence or fact-based positivity. Paranoia is the fear, and which is also not evidence-based, because if it is evidence-based, then it is a risk. It is not paranoia. So now when you look at those two, there is a very interesting field which we use in the field of leadership called the zone of creative tension. So for every individual, the zone of creative tension is that space which is not so easy that you get bored with it. Okay, so which is the toxic positivity side of the dimension. And it's not so difficult that you give up, which is the paranoia side of there. You don't step out and you start falling sick mentally because you're scared to death. So the zone of creative tension is which tells you that there is a challenge, but you strive to adapt to that challenge. So it is in the field of Harappa education, it is adaptive learning. So constantly increasing the challenge so the individual learner is on the path to improve their capabilities. But not make it so difficult in goal setting, like a difficult boss, that the individual just gives up saying that I'll never be able to please this boss of mine. Or to make it so comfortable that the individual becomes absolutely lazy. So toxic positivity and paranoia are on the two ends of that same spectrum. But evidence-based psychology and the risk, an appetite for constantly checking and managing risk is the zone of creative tension when we live in a society or the world that we operate. Setting goals for life is also a part of that same framework. And for each individual, it is very different. So the risk that I take versus the risk that you will take is dependent on what you perceive as a challenge, which is doable with a little bit of effort, compared to my view of doable with a little bit of effort. So understanding that, and so I'm not saying that don't have any fear, because then you'll be reckless, which is how typically teenagers behave. Because the human brain is designed like that. So teenagers' brain are that they have the maximum potential but no brakes. So they are reckless in this world, and they're designed like that. So there's no fault. I had two teenagers, so I give them ample.
I have one. I'm living through early teenagehood with my son right now. So
yeah. So maximum potential. The brain is buzzing with ideas, and the neurons are all connected, and there are no breaks. So there is no self-control or concern for risk. That's bad, and that has to be watched out for, and you need to deal with that. So I would say that a little bit of fear or carefulness, but not getting completely positive, saying that nothing is going to happen to me. That's the perfect balance that we all should strive for.
Sure. I think that's a really, really useful spectrum and very easy to visualize, where toxic positivity is on one side, paranoia is on one end, and in the middle is a zone of creative tension, as we called it, where you're calibrating risks against opportunities, essentially, right? Before we start taking audience questions, and there are already several, I just want to say, can the field of positive psychology, because we also have senior people as participants on the webinar who are responsible for teams and custodians of talent. Can these principles apply as well to organizations or groups of people as they do to individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the genesis of appreciative inquiry started with, dealing with this whole organizational side, which had been completely inundated with problem solvers. And when you look at the statistics, so if there are so many problems and there are so many consultants, then there should have been so many failed organizations to begin with. But you had successful organizations which were still coming up with problems, unearthing problem after problem, and constantly on that hamster wheel, saying that, I'll become perfect, and nothing was changing. So appreciative inquiry or positive psychology started from the field of saying that individuals, teams, organizations, and society all benefit from this.
Understood.
The way to use it is to wear an organizational lens, which is also very difficult, or not, it doesn't come very naturally to all of us. So when we interview candidates, so when we are hiring someone, we create a template saying that this is a job description. Now I will match people to this job description. Now you can still do that with an appreciative inquiry, frame, or you could do it with a, saying that, okay, let me look at what all the individual doesn't have to fit
elimination,
into
right? Or
yeah. Now, every human who walks this planet has been designed to be successful. Who survived childbirth and the early stages of childhood is designed for success. So there's no other human who could judge that, whether that individual is capable or not. The second aspect is that you can go in and say that, okay, what does this individual have, which I can use and amplify? One of my best examples is the circus group Cirque du Soleil, which is now slightly a bit of a trouble because of the COVID crisis. But they never went and looked at trapeze artist or, a clown, saying that this is the kind of clown that we want. They had a talent hunt process where they went around meeting interesting people, saying, oh, what could we create with these guys? And that's how they were so innovative and good. If you wear the lens of a parent doesn't look at the children and say that this child is not fit to be my child. They look at the child and say, what's the best that I can do, and give them a chance at life. Now, when you take that mindset, every talent, every human being that walks through your doors is capable of being absolutely brilliant for you, if you know how to tap that skill or talent in your organization. But we do exactly the opposite.
We look to find faults rather than say, this is the asset I have, and what can I make of it, and what can I help it do for itself, right?
And we have become a society which has taken superhuman capabilities as given, and that's the starting point. What do I define as superhuman capabilities? Your eyesight, hearing, speech, motor mobility, cognitive ability, everything is at peak, is superhuman. Not everybody has that. And if your job description or your talent program starts with defining the job for a superhuman, you are narrowing down your potential pool. When you look at autistic people, they're absolutely brilliant at doing monotonous tasks without even getting bored. So for them, the zone of creative tension is to be able to test lines of codes non-stop for 8 hours and do the job that a normal human would find impossible to do in 2 days. They could achieve it in half a shift, which is like one shift, they could achieve that in 4 hours or 6 hours. But then you don't hire them because you think that they're incapable of operating in a corporate environment. So I think that's where we have an opportunity for organizations and teams to wear the appreciative inquiry lens.
Super. I'm going to take some audience questions now, Debu. We have a question from Mahesh Iyer. He's saying, what is the best way to find one's strength? One is personal realization, but if I want to get to the strengths of 100 of my people, is Strength Finder a good one? Is there anything else? So we'll go to that one in the next section. Is all about how do you discover strength. Same with Sutkanun Kamrat from Vigrim. I think we'll do a whole discovery strength is the next 20 minutes of conversations. Then there are some others from somebody saying how to avoid the zabardasti positivity. I mean, when things are not right, still someone in HR pushing people to stay positive. Why not acknowledge the negative emotions? I think we've spoken about that a little bit, but if you wanted to add, just want to know if anxiety can be turned into a strength. And I think we again spoke about that. So maybe you could take those two and combine that. And the last question at this stage, how do we determine when we should work on a weakness and if you worked enough on a strength? Okay, so I think I'll go to that also in the next section. So maybe these two, Debu, about why not acknowledge negative emotions and can anxiety be turned into a strength? And then we'll jump into the discovery of strengths.
Sure. So why not tap into the negative emotions? So so let me start with one of the biggest problems that all of us face. We are designed where our body is static in one position, so it is here and now, whereas a brain is non-linear. So a brain at any given point of time is either recalling the past or fantasizing about the future. It actually spends very little time on here and now. So your negative emotions are emotions which are not linked to the present. Your negative emotions are either coming out of fantasies of the future or recollection of the same thing happened sometime in the past and it was painful, so this is not going to work, and I start getting into a circle of negative emotion. So one of the things to figure out, and when you look at negative emotions, I really like the work of some of our Vedanta philosophers. So the Vedanta school of thought is that emotions are like clouds in the sky. So you cannot assume that the cloud has to be dealt with. It is fleeting and passing, and the sky remains there. The cloud comes and goes. So you just need to realize what is giving rise to that, and then being comfortable with it. And that's a very interesting piece in neuroscience as well. That emotions are always going to be fleeting. So if you find yourself being flooded with that, just anchor yourself in something which is not letting the brain switch to fantasies or past recollection. So focusing on your breath or the sensation of the whatever the texture, sensation, or the motor coordination which is unfamiliar, allows you to clear your head of those clouds. So if you look at your brain or your head as a blue sky, it just allows those clouds to drift away and you stay anchored. So it is good to know, but not get bothered about it, but to know that, is there a way I can calm my brain so that I don't get affected by it? And to go to the point of saying that why is it being caused? It's not that, I'll get harmed or anything. Why is this negative thought coming in the first place? That realization is a great exercise or a journey for evolving as an individual.
Sure. And I think so you're not at all saying that, yes, you should acknowledge a negative emotion. I think you should say that, yes, why am I feeling so worried or anxious or whatever right now? And try and get yourself to a position of being in the present. And that introspection of why one is feeling is important to do because it will help you get to know yourself better. So yes, I think it's important to the person who asked this question that you can acknowledge your negative emotions, and you should, but you shouldn't get trapped by them and let it become a spiral. Let's jump to the other three audience questions that we have, and then this also takes us to our next theme within this conversation, is how do you discover your strengths, right? And what methodology do you use? And both as an individual as well as if you're managing a group of people, how do you help them discover their strengths, and how do you know their strengths also if you need to use them as assets, for example?
So see, one of the things that we have designed and we do at EMA Partners on the leadership side is that we help leaders prepare for new assignments, new roles, new contexts, new goals. And you can't do it by telling them that, okay, all of this is new and you have to now cope up with this. The only way you can make them comfortable and perform is that by giving them the confidence that they have what it takes to deal with this newness or this experience that is coming your way. And how do we do it? So we first look at what I call as experience, expectations, engagement, and execution. So what experiences do I have which has similar components to what I'm going to be doing right now? Okay, so what past experiences do I have which I can carry into So what are the expectations? So first I list down the experiences. Saying that I have these kind of experiences. I have been in a difficult team situation. I was in a difficult team situation. I worked in an organization which actually had a lot of crisis and finally it shut down. I worked in an organization which asked me to go and work in a new geography. So I worked in a new geography and so on and so forth. I had to change teams 4 times. So you have a vast, toolkit of experiences which you are carrying with you. So that's the first step. Second step is you identify which of those energized you the most. There will be some which will be, I really didn't enjoy it. I did it, but I didn't enjoy it. So now you find out which are the ones which energized you the most. Then you look at a new set of expectations, saying that can you take your past experiences and be able to use them in the new expectations that are there in front of you. Those which are energizing, you focus on those, and the rest you find ways of saying that who else is there in my peer group or my team who can help me with that? Do they have experiences which can supplement mine? And then execution, saying that here is a timeline within which I'll execute and ensure that it gets done. This exercise you could do for teams of 100 people, teams of 1,000. I have run large-scale interactive processes for more than 500 people at one go.
Is there a tool that you can point people to?
Yeah, it's so use appreciative inquiry. Good news is the appreciative inquiry is free to use. So it was developed by David Cooperrider. So there's an Indian who was the founder of this frame, and David Cooperrider, and those tools are available. It's it's there on the World Wide Web. You can pick up templates, toolkits. Large-scale interactive process, the process to design hundreds of people coming together and decoding their strengths, which will help them work as a team, matching expectations, reassigning, and so on and so forth. So you could do it for, and I think I know Mahesh here, so I'll figure that out later on. But you can do it in large teams, global organizations, in small teams. You could do it for yourself as well.
Sure. And just help me recap the 4 E's. The 4 E's you said, which is sort of
experiences, expectations, engaging your team, so engagement, and execution. So the timeline within which you'll execute. So we use that for helping people transition into unfamiliar contexts, roles, teams, or goals. Now, if you want to do work as an individual, one of your best people to talk to. So this is a very simple tool. All of us know how to do it, but we never use it because we wait for that, that appreciation or confirmation from bosses and people who have a very different equation with us. But our spouse, best friends who don't mince words, are the best people to go and talk to, saying that, what do you think I'm really good at? And they will give you a long list of stuff. My spouse or my wife will obviously have saying that you're really good at this, but I wish you changed some 5 things. That's a different issue, but you will receive appreciative, confirmation from people who really know you well. And you can take some of those stuff and take it to the workplace. You can take it to the team. You can bring that to play in your life. So we know how to conduct root cause analysis. The only problem is that we spend hours and hours of time doing root cause analysis of problems and not our own success. So whether it is our success or the organization's success, we never do the root cause analysis of success. So that's the biggest problem.
I think that's very memorable, that do a root cause analysis. What made you successful? What did I do in this role, which was a high point in my career, that made me successful? Did I work harder than everyone else? Or did I work smarter than everyone else? Did I have the best mentor? I mean, there are many things. I'm really good at attracting mentors. Was I really planned? Did I work to a plan? I think that kind of introspection and constantly being really curious about why you were successful in points that you were successful is, I guess, what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and just to give an example, I have used behavioral event interviews and interviewing candidates or people for assessment into roles. Without fail, when you use a structured behavioral event interview, what does it do? It basically says that, it identifies all the experiences that you have, and then it seeks to understand how did you deal with that? What were the high points? Who was involved? What did you do? What was the outcome? Till date, I haven't met a single individual who, after spending 1.5 hours or 3 hours, typically it's 1.5 hours to 3 hours, of time giving a behavioral event interview who said that, I'm really tired. It energizes people because you are helping them recollect their high points, their success stories, their experiences, paint it in vivid detail. So it just allows people to relive those moments, and that's energizing. But if I presented to them, how would you launch a rocket, they would probably struggle and it will just take away the energy. But if I ask them that, how did you deal with a difficult colleague? They will have hundreds of examples of how they were successful, how did they make a difference. So all of that is already existing. We just don't look for it.
Are there any other tools and diagnostics that you would like to point people to that they could use beyond the two that you've mentioned also that you found to be effective?
So there is a complete website called Authentic Happiness by one of the leaders of positive psychology globally called Martin Seligman. University of UPenn has a site called Authentic Happiness. It's a positive psychology center, which Martin Seligman is currently now associated with UPenn. And it has questionnaires. So it has a strength finder, and all of these are free resources. So you have to just create a login, and it has a strength finder, authentic happiness, signature strengths, authentic happiness. You have at least 8 or 10 of those, which you can use for different contexts. So there are people who have made this their life's mission to make this available to people, because the world deserves to be a much happier place than what it is.
Yes. I'll request the Harappa team to some of the tools that Debu was mentioning, if they can look it up and put it on the chat. Somebody is asking, it was Authentic Happiness by Martin Seligman, right? Debu, somebody is asking what was the name. So I'm guessing there must be AuthenticHappiness.org. And we'll send that, we'll try and paste that link somewhere during the conversation, Anandita, for sure, so that you can see it. And the Appreciative Inquiry also must be appreciativeinquiry.org. Is there a forum like that?
No, it is actually it's a very simple Google search string, and it will take you to the complete repository of Appreciative Inquiry. There are a lot of free resources which people have created, shared it, and it's a discovery which is great to have.
Okay, great. Let me just also, somebody wants you to talk about Appreciative Inquiry again, and maybe you can do that with some of the other questions. Let me take a few questions.
Sure.
There was one question that was pending from last one. That's want to know if anxiety can be turned into strength. That was one question. One strength can come out more specific, and how does one seek this? Okay, that's a really interesting question. Again, from Mahesh, is saying that how do you seek situations once you've discovered your strength? This is about actually deploying your strengths, and we're moving into that territory, that once you know what your strengths are, how do you seek situations and environments which are conducive to your strengths being showcased? And Anandita is also asking, how do we determine when we should work on a weakness and if we have worked enough on a strength? So when do we stop strength seeking and start to work on one's weaknesses?
See, my answer would be somewhere between, what do you define as weakness? Now, my definition of weakness could be very different from the definition of a daily laborer's, what is a weakness? Inability to earn wages to even afford a simple meal. That's a weakness, right? At some stage, and I will share a formula which is very personal, but it's a formula which could be very useful if you look at it. If you wanted a formula for happiness, okay, it is what you have divided by what you want. Okay, so how do you maximize happiness? First, you have to figure out what you have. And if you want more than what you have, your happiness is going to get impacted. So there is one way that you prune down what you want down to the basics. The COVID crisis is a brilliant opportunity to look at what you want. What you want.
What you really want.
What you really want. The safety and security of your loved ones. What you really want. To know that you're going to survive, and the basics of food, not fancy restaurant meals, but healthy food, which is extremely important. What do you have? You have all of this already. But you have spent so much of time seeking, confirmation, or approval from people who really didn't matter. They don't matter in the time of crisis. They have never mattered, and you've spent your lifetime going through, chasing this dream that I'll get a 5 rating in my performance appraisal. Whereas your performance appraisal doesn't matter. Who has survived the COVID crisis with a year-on-year 5 rating on performance appraisal? Please give me an example. Right. So look at opportunities of using your strengths. Can you stay at home and not step out and be happy? Right. Ask yourself that question. If you can, the situation right now is absolutely designed for you. You should. In HR, there is this whole thing that, oh, we are like a family. That's the biggest lie that we tell everybody.
I hate
the
that.
organization is
Teams.
not your family. The organization is not. You have a family back at home. Please spend time with them. This is what the COVID crisis is teaching you. The reason why some of us are very uncomfortable is that we haven't been able to come to terms with spending so much of time with our families.
So true. I love that happiness equations. What you want, what you have divided by what you want. So I think you have to ensure that both sides of the equation, one, you're computing generously and truthfully, that you actually have more than you whatever. And the what you want, the denominator, you're not ensuring that it balloons so much that your equation will obviously be not very exciting for you. I think that's again something really useful to remember.
And on the anxiety piece, again, one of the pieces from neurosciences, that our brain is not designed to deal with stress. So anxiety brings about certain changes to us, which feeds itself, and you become more and more anxious, and you're not able to think straight. So anxiety is never good. So you have to find ways of anxiety and the will to live or to continue to live are two different things. So anxiety is more driving you into survival mode, where the will to live is largely saying that, oh, I have so much to be grateful for, and I should do this. My loved ones require me to be there for them. I should be there. It's a great relationship. I enjoy it so much. So these are two different dimensions, but anxiety is never good.
Understood. So, but I think that's good. The anxiety will pull you in the sort of the
survival,
default, whatever, of survival and strengths, and that will put you into hopefully gratitude and contentment, but also the urge to thrive, not just survive, right? Which is, right. I guess, what we focus on also at Harappa. Great, that's really interesting. How does one rediscover strengths and capabilities, right? Because I think we all had strengths that sometimes the world beats out of us because of poor feedback that we've got, or because we've changed and we've not noticed it, or because we've changed and evolved and actually those earlier strengths were much more important. Is that a little bit different from, can I focus on rediscovering my strengths and not just discovering them?
Yeah, so there are brilliant ways of rediscovering strengths that all humans are born with. And I wrote an article last year during the COVID crisis about neuroscience and leadership and savant powers. So what are savant powers? Savant powers are unnatural superhuman capabilities which arise in individuals who suffer from a brain injury. Okay, so people who have massive accidents, they suddenly wake up out of that, recover from the brain injury with superhuman powers, either of music or maths or painting and so on and so forth. So they discover their strengths that they were born with. And there's a very interesting explanation of this in the field of neuroscience. So all of us who are on this call and we are discussing, we are who we are not because of what we did. We are who we are because of all that we didn't do. So all that we chose to ignore has defined us, not what we have chosen to do. Because it's a very interesting piece about how the human brain works. At the age of 2, the brain of a child has the maximum number of synaptic connections or neural circuitry. And from the age of 2 till you reach the adulthood, it becomes half. So it gets pruned away. And synaptic pruning happens every day. So as we are speaking, some new synapses are getting activated, but some old synapses are decaying and dying out. So it's like a human circuitry. The ones which you use become stronger, and the ones you don't use decay and go away. So we all are born with all the superhuman capabilities, but what our parents tell us not to do, what the society tells us not to do, what we choose not to do, the experiences that we ignore, all of that starts shaping us and defining us. So it basically takes away from what we could have been. But the good news is that human brain is plastic and you can rediscover those. So new practices, see, there is a very interesting definition about, people are saying that, are you born, naturally born with certain abilities, and what is merit? So meritocracy is a myth. That the faster you come to that realization, the better it is. So only three things define, how you turn out. So one is your capacities, so what you're born with and what you build over a period of time. So what you ignore or don't practice, that determines the capacities which are left with you. The circumstances into which you were born. So if I was born in, let's say Syria versus if I was born in New Delhi, that defines a certain amount of who I become. And then the things that I decide to engage in, which again goes back and reconfirms the capacities or generates new capacities. So these are the only three things that matter. So if anybody believes that it is their merit because of which who they are, is absolutely wrong. That's a false sense of comfort. It is luck. It is where you were born. It is what you chose to do and what you chose not to do. So these are the determinants of who we are.
So I'm going to push you back on that, and I'm going to use a question from the audience to come to our last part of the conversation, given that we only have 14 minutes left. Was the same on deploying your strengths, right? So we spoke about why you need to talk a strengths-based language and vocabulary and focus on this. Then we spoke obviously about how do you discover strengths through different kinds of tools, both as individuals and as groups of people, or for groups of people, and then deploying strengths, right? You spoke about, listen, this is a myth of merit. And there's a question, that's come up to say, what does one know by knowing one's strength? Don't people keep changing with time and experiences? So then is strength is also very transient, or do you have more permanent strengths as situations evolve? And the larger question truly that I'm just about, as professionals or whatever, right? Both as custodians of professionals or as professionals ourselves, what do we do once we discover our strengths or the strengths of those around us? How do we communicate them? If I've discovered a strength about them, how do I go tell my spouse, child, co-founder, investor, employee that, oh, wow, this is a strength that I have? And for what purpose and what reason, do I use my strength for?
Okay, so let me start with the last question first, because that's a very interesting question. So if you look at strengths as static, you get caught in this whole. You become your own victim of being complacent, because you change as you evolve as a human being. So if you just become static and say, oh, these are my strengths, now let me deploy it, I'll just get caught in the trap and probably not discover things that I could have. When you want to communicate your strengths, you run the risk of becoming boastful, because you're almost over amplifying those. But if you did something else as a communication tool, so if you are able to share with people all the high points that you have had in your life so far and share those stories, you will be very vivid, because human memory recall brings in vividity with pleasant experiences and traumatic experiences as well, but pleasant experiences have far more vividity to it. So the ability for somebody else to understand you and therefore what you can really do will be far greater. So if you just use a template of saying that I'll share stories of the high points that I've enjoyed, and somebody who can connect with that and give me an opportunity is probably the best outcome that I look for, is the best path to take. Because you're not zeroing in on this is my strength. You're just focusing on your experiences, which we go back to saying that our experiences is what defines who we are. And our ability to capture and distill those experiences and be able to communicate it makes others understand who we are. And if they are good at finding avenues for us to amplify that, that's the best place for me to be. So that's the structure to follow.
So once you realize it, it's not like you go and say, hey, listen, I'm very agile and I'm very ambitious. You actually say, hey, well, guess what? I've actually changed 3 full careers in my whatever. And each of these, while I was very nervous and did not know, I actually managed to, it was very exciting for me to learn new skills, new careers. So you say, is that Am I getting the
Yeah,
distinction
that's
right?
right.
Instead of saying that I'm really adaptable and agile and I can work in any industry I want.
Yeah. So don't use adjectives for yourself. Just say that, I can share the story of how I dealt with a particular situation. I really enjoyed doing it. If I could do that in some way uh, for you or with you, then that's the course to take. So you are able to give them the complete picture because you enjoyed doing it and you're seeking an opportunity to do it again.
Yeah, I
So
think that's a really important point also that you said, that I think that I'll at least remember, don't use adjectives for yourself, which actually I think a lot of these strengths based tools actually help you become a persona, and then you start thinking of yourself as, I'm the strategic thinker, or I am the empathetic companion and things like that, right? Which is this fixed thing. So I think to the person who asked this question about this, is it important to discover strengths? I guess it is from your own self-confidence point of view, and to give you strength more than that they will change or not. But tell me, you work with so many senior leadership teams and so many CEOs and whatever on many parts of their talent transformation, change management, whatever. Can you tell a team apart when really an individual strengths and a team strengths are well aligned? Does this utopia really exist, that when a team of 80 people all are in touch with their strengths, and what happens to the composite group then? Does it become an aggregation of all their strengths, or all of the main strengths get amplified? And have you ever seen that? Does this mythical beast exist?
yeah, so the mythical beast is what everybody strives for, but that is the biggest danger for corporate or organization development. This whole consensus and alignment, is the
Hmm.
biggest danger. So the most ineffective teams are where there is complete alignment and there is complete consensus.
Mhm.
And I'll explain. And this is based on research. So because I used to do work in the top team alignment space, when everybody is aligned, you actually forego looking at the same situation from different lenses. So alignment is also an indicator that you have lack of diversity of opinion in the team. It is virtually impossible that you have extreme diversity and complete alignment. That's number one. Second is, why is diversity important? Not all of us have all the experiences, which can come to play. So it has to be the collective experience of everybody, which, if it is diverse, will create a far greater 360-degree view, and it will be useful for the organization for decision making. Why lack of alignment is extremely important? If everybody agrees, then there is somebody who's not stating the counter viewpoint, because it's unlike, see, any organization which hits 100% of its goals and targets, somebody is gaming the system, because every strategy, every business plan is based on assumptions. And to say that all of our assumptions came to play, somebody has gamed the system, which is virtually impossible. There is no human who can predict how the market will turn out in 100% accurate way. So organizations which hit their numbers, there is absolute gaming happening. I can bet my future income and earnings, I'll go and prove to them that it is being gamed. So the ability to not be comfortable with alignment is an extremely important aspect of being a true leader. Then the ability not to have a consensus is even a far greater sign of leadership, because you have heard everybody out, but you are being decisive, saying that, okay, we saw all the counter viewpoints, but we choose this path. If we fail, we know that we chose the wrong path. But if we haven't heard those three other counter viewpoints, we don't know what path to choose the next time around. So in top teams, alignment and complete consensus are very, very dangerous signs, and 100% hitting goals or targets year on year.
Which means you're underachieving. There's a question from Nivedita on this thing you were talking about, the diversity and alignment, sort of 2 by 2 almost. Don't teams with complementing strengths mean that they will have enough diversity? Not necessarily, I'm guessing. Diversity of strengths is different from diversity of perspective, right?
Yeah, that's right. So let's take board governance in India, a topic which is very close to my heart because I ran the West Board study for consecutive years. What is board governance? Board governance is that you give what is good corporate governance, or what is good governance overall, is that the weakest voice finds its path and is heard. Okay, weakest
Beautiful.
voice. Now, when you look at board composition, What is the board composition? You don't have adequate women representation. You've had to force a quota system to nominate women, and only family members from the promoter families also get that women board member seat. You don't have no representation from the millennials or the 20, 25-year-olds who work in the organization, which is probably the largest workforce. You don't have representation. You don't have representation from workmen who are the blue collar, who are a complete different category. So you actually do not have diverse opinions on the board. You have retired bureaucrats, you have family members, you have quotas being filled by people who shouldn't be there. And you're not looking at diversity, you're looking for more and more familiar thought process in the board. Now, the moment you have that, it is just going to percolate down. You're going to have sameness and sameness cascading through layers and layers of the organization. So we do, when we do leadership assessments on career motives and culture, we find something invariably that the leaders, if the leader is interviewing and selecting candidates, they select people who are almost identical to their type. So you have zero diversity in teams. Now, we talked about diversity in boards, we talked about diversity in leadership teams, and we talked about diversity at manager and leader level. If you don't have diversity, then it just remains posters on the wall and nothing gets done. If you
So
want
diversity is a, yeah. So the diversity is a combination of diversity in strengths, diversity in perspective, and diversity demographic and psychographic,
absolutely.
right? Like that's true diversity. It can't just be like, for example, in all of this gender and DNI conversation, I'm like, you can't have half the world be considered a diversity hiring women of 50%, right? So that's not even diversity. So I think it is a true diversity, which is complementary, is then the really challenging, hopefully the zone of creative tension, hopefully that achievable, but very tough to do.
Yeah, and there should be no goal to say that, we should have completely complementary. So this goes back to the earlier question that how do we discover our strengths and then what do we... So the discovery of strength is the process you should never give up on. So what are the new strengths which you discover compared to last year is a process that you need to get comfortable with. Similarly with complementary skills, that you can't design saying that now I have complementary skills. What is that new diversity I can introduce to the mix? See, the COVID virus is a new element in the mix. It is changing our response.
So you add a new element rather than trying to only manipulate and maneuver what you have, right? Sometimes it is an inclusion, a new addition, which can really make. We only have got what a fascinating discussion. We only have 3 minutes left. I'm just going to ask 2 questions and then you can try and respond quickly. We talked about amplifying and embedding the strengths more. I think we've covered that. The question that I want to ask, and this is, I think, very true to a lot of workplace cultures in India, which, if we are all very honest with each other, can seem very petty and not enabling and supporting of each other. I don't think we celebrate each other enough. We're not very good at giving compliments, I think, as a society. How do you create then, and certainly for a leader, right? How do you create stories and learnings of strengths? How do you communicate and celebrate about individual teams without breeding an unhealthy competition amongst teams, individuals, or people saying, hey, I know, you love these 2 people because it's so obvious and things like that. How can we just feel much less hindered when we truly want to praise someone?
So if you wear the appreciative inquiry lens, you will be able to do it without fail in every single situation. So my personal story is that I reached a stage where I stopped interviewing people because there is no candidate that I can reject. And which is true today, even today, I cannot reject any candidate because I will always find something fascinating and unique in them, which is so exciting that I would like to do something. I would like them to come and work with me and we could do something interesting. So you reach a stage where there is no way you cannot be appreciative about an individual. And that path of discovery is extremely, extremely important. Because otherwise we go out looking for flaws. And I keep saying this to people that, if you want to look for flaws, you'll find flaws in everything.
And everyone. But can I talk about this? If I found something amazing in a whatever, till what point can I talk about it without like their colleague, this person's peer, or then I'm constantly talking about everybody's strength is the response. And that work hard to find that one strength in every person, every team that you can tell others about and celebrate them. And because you're doing it to all others, nobody should feel insecure or left out.
So for that, there's a phrase which one of my ex-managers taught me. What's the best use case? So if you start looking at individuals, saying that what is the best use case for this individual, you will be able to find an appreciation and strength, which others will also agree with. Because it's a use case. So it is about saying that, yeah, this person will really work well in this situation. But if you took the situation first and found people, you'll always find them. But he or she cannot do these 3 or 4 things. But what's the best use case? The other piece is that we need to start breaking down jobs into manageable components, which becomes very, very important. See, we recently did an exercise. So I worked with a ex-colleague of mine to build an AI tool where it ingests all the JDs of your organization and then throws out all the tasks from that JDs, which can be reorganized so that people who have visual disability, physical disability, neural disability, speech disability, hearing disability, how it can be reassigned to those individuals. So we built a massive skills library at the back end. And we said that these skills can be done by people who have motor disability or speech disability. And then when we found those activities which required those skills, we said that, okay, this, if you chop it off from this JD, you can park it and create a job opportunity for somebody who's blind. Now, that's the approach you could take, saying that, okay, this individual may not be able to do the whole task. Can I craft the job so that he or she becomes successful in it?
I think to be able to do that at a micro level in large organizations, and with making this point, we have to end. You have to empower. I mean, we have no choice if we run large organizations and big teams, that you have to empower every individual and every manager to be able to have this. You can't centralize this, because there is no way that a CHRO or an L&D head will only be able to say who that one person is, because you need. So I think that first line, and I think more and more, I just get convinced that first line of managers in any setting has to be just so much better trained and so much better equipped, I think, so that that they can do some of this both for themselves and for the people who they observe much more closely than others do. With that, we have to come to an end. David, thank you so much. I think it was a really fascinating discussion. I learned a lot. So thank you for joining us. And to our participants and the audience, thank you so very much for joining us today. We hope you found some things that are useful that you can take away from. Please continue to log on to Thrive Talks. We are here every other Thursday at 4 p.m. Thank you so much. Thank you to the Harappa team for helping us put this together.
Thanks, Shreyasi. Thanks, Harappa team, and thanks everyone. Really great to be here.
Thank you. Bye. We'll end the webinar now. Thank you. Bye.